This is Rose Kananu, and I'm looking forward to reconnecting, I think, with PMI Kenya and sharing in today's conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. And then RuPaul?
Hi, I'm so honored to be here. I'm looking forward to actually just having a great discussion and learning from everyone. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Fantastic. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody's story.
Okay, and of course, last but not least, Jean.
Hi, Susan. Hi, everybody. So nice to be on a panel of, and in fact, I just noticed that we are all ladies. This is great. I don't know whether it means that we're the ones who have more career experience, but I'm happy to be on this panel. And I'm also looking forward to hearing a lot of the stories because we're always learning something new every day.
Absolutely right. And I know you've all had amazing experiences, and it's interesting, yes, that it's an all ladies group. And it goes without saying that each of you has actually played a very critical role in the growth and development of this chapter. So Jean, you are a very able president. Stephanie is currently our VP for volunteers. RuPaul has been a volunteer in events and the volunteers team. And of course, Rose was part of the board before she moved to where she currently is. So I am honored. Extremely, extremely honored. And I know I could talk about all your accolades, but I will not. What I will say is this. The ladies in the room have a collective experience of at least 60 years in project management and project leadership. They have spanned across industries, whether we're talking about the IT industry, construction industry, the non-governmental space. And I know one of the questions that, and I'm going to throw this one to you, Jean, is that we're saying project management as a profession has grown and is growing. And in fact, a PMI report said that by 2027, that we'll need so many more project managers that we need today. And there's someone in the room wondering, how comes there's such a big need for project managers? And yet I can't find a job. So Jean, tell us, is project management a worthwhile profession? And why should someone pursue it?
Okay. I normally always get the first question on the panel. You know, sometimes sometimes it's always good to be the second person, but it's okay. I'll take the challenge. Thank you for that question, Susan. The question to, you know, how there's been a big demand in project management. How come I don't have a job? And it's a very valid question. And where I would like to start is project management or project managers are actually the unsung heroes for a lot of in the organization, because they turn ideas into reality. Okay, so number one, that is the positioning of the project manager and the project management profession. And this is why project management has become and is continuing to become a big or a very well-known profession. In Kenya, we are really beginning to get mature in this area. And a lot of organizations are understanding that in order for them to actualize their corporate strategies, they need people who can be able to, you know, operationalize those strategies. And so more and more, they're finding that these project managers, these people who are called project managers, are people who are very skilled in delivery. And they need that skill so that they can be assured of success and they can be able to get to the bottom line, which is either making profit or some other business outcomes. And this is why the demand has continued to grow. In maybe the developed countries, it has grown a little faster than in countries like ours, as an example, you know, in Kenya. But it's so impressive to see that there's a lot of work that has been going on, and there's a lot of recognition about project management that has been growing. You can see that from education and from the way most companies are becoming projectized. And to the question about whether about the worthwhile, is project management a worthwhile career? You know, for me, I'm passionate about project management, so I can only say good things about project management. So to that question, if you look at what Michael Porter said as an example, and this was all the way back in 2016, that project management has become a competence in corporate, yeah, and in strategy. It is the only way that they can be able to deliver strategy, and therefore, Is it a worthwhile profession? Yes, it is, because we are being seen as change makers. We are being seen as the critical people who are going to deliver that strategy. Okay. And so if you find that maybe you're not being able to find a job, I would suggest that actually you have to look at yourself first. Yeah. And you have to see whether the way that you're representing yourself as a project resource is, are you well equipped? Do you have the technical expertise or the knowledge so that you can compete in that particular space? There are more and more project managers or people who are calling themselves project managers who are getting into that space. Number two is, what is, even as you're getting into the project space, is that your passion? Figure out whether that is really the area that you're doing the best, or this is your natural talent is in project management, and you'll find that actually you will gravitate and you'll be able to get very easily into that particular area. So with your skills, whether you have the technical domain expertise, and do you have those competencies that are going to help you compete in that same area, and also you have to see whether maybe you have to look at the way you're presenting yourself. Is your resume actually reflecting the kind of expertise that you have? And are people going to be able to see that? Because for me, I look at a lot of resumes every day, and people want project roles, but when you look at their resume, it's not speaking about project management. And so you cannot, there's a variance in the way that most people are presenting themselves. So I think a lot of the times, instead of blaming the profession for not having the job or not finding it, I think that maybe we should internalize it ourselves and see whether we are in the right place. Is that where I want, when I being able to represent myself adequately in that place? So I think that's where I would start, Susan.
Fantastic. And the reason why you always get to go first, Jean, is because you always set the stage so well for the discussions that are coming up. So as a quick reminder to everyone, not flattery at all. I know you've been doing some amazing work with the county government, and we'll probably talk a bit about that a little later, because I know people want to know how then can we actually bring transformation and change from the grassroots, because that's a big question for us in Kenya. And I'd just like to remind our participants, if you're not speaking, please be on mute. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat, and we will definitely have a section to answer them. And Stephanie, I want to come to you next, because not only are you very
Susan, before I go to Stephanie.
Go ahead, Abdul.
Ron is part of the panel. You did not introduce him.
Oh, Ron. Hi. Welcome. We didn't see you there.
It looks like there is a conspiracy going on here.
No conspiracy at all, Ron. Welcome.
I know. I trust you all. It's my pleasure to be here. I heard it was a ladies only panel, and then I said, okay, let me watch this.
Sorry, Ron.
So thank you so much. Looking forward to an engaging discussion. And like Stephanie said, I'm also here to hear about other people's stories, because I know mine too well.
Fantastic. And I'd say Ron and Abdul have demonstrated to us how to stand up and have your voice heard, because one of the biggest challenges I know we face as project managers is having your voice heard, and repeatedly heard over and over again, whether you are giving the good news or whether you're giving the not so good news that there's going to be a delay in delivery of the project. So thank you, Ron. Thank you, Abdul. And again, Ron, apologies for not recognizing you at the start. So I'll just jump over to Stephanie.
Before I go to Stephanie, maybe you could go to Rose. Our network will drop. It's raining cats and dogs in our area.
Oh.
Yeah, it's gonna stop on and off, but I'll do around.
Okay, Rose, that's okay. I know I've had the pleasure of working with Rose. I have also had the pleasure of interacting with Rose on many different forums and many different capacities. And Rose, I know you are very passionate about project management. You have more than 20 years experience in capital projects in the construction space. I know you have actually been a startup CEO and you have done training and been part of many different forums that have allowed you to give a voice to project management in the marketplace. And I think you have a very unique experience to share with us because you have made the transition from consulting and business back into employment and I think back again. And that's a story I think we would all like to hear. So Rose, over to you. Tell us about this transition and what it's meant for you.
Wow. Gosh, I think I've been in transition for a long time, but if I can use project management as the pivot, I think, to explain it, I found that project management is no longer for me just a discipline, it's actually a tool. And the fact that I got into project management purely by accident makes it even more remarkable. So yes, I did practice project management as a career for about 16 years in my first phase of employment. And then I found somewhere towards the tail end of that 16 years, I was doing strategy type of work. And then I came back to Kenya. And I got employed at PwC briefly for 2 years where they wanted to establish project management to use it to service their customers. And in fact, that was the time when I joined PMI because I'd been away from Kenya for 10 years. So I said, how do I find my feet back in the country? How do I rebuild my networks? And a colleague said, oh, did you know PMI Kenya is in Kenya? There's a chapter. And I think that was the first transition, I would say, because then PMI and project management helped to launch me back into the construction industry that I had not been in for 10 years. During the period when I served on the board and we started to advocate for project management in the country, project management helped me, I think, get established back in the industry. So that transition, I would say. Then the PwC, 2 years, I didn't quite enjoy the corporate scene. So I started my own business. And what would you know? Project management was the tool that helped me scale my business. For the first 3 years, everything we did, testing the product in the market, I was running my business on 6-month sprints, so to speak. So we would test a business model for 6 months, do lessons learned, whatnot. And today is actually a special day because one of my first set of employees, actually, Michael Rigai, who's now a PMI Kenya member, was certified yesterday. He is now a CAPM. Michael started with me, had never heard about project management, had never worked in construction, but he learned very fast, just from my tutelage as we were trying to build a business, applying project management techniques. At some point, we brought on Elizabeth Kilungu, who is also a PMI member, as a consultant, and Michael learned. And then he said, I want to get certified. I said, sure. And when he started studying about 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, he's like, yeah, he just registered, I think, in March. And then he said, I'm going to sit in May. I was like, oh, you know, Michael, it actually takes time. And this week, we've been working crazy busy in the business, and he somehow sat and passed. So just listening, I think even not just from me, but I see now the power of project management. So I pivoted the business in 2019. The business model wasn't working very well. I had burned through a lot of cash, almost run bankrupt, literally. And I was burnt out after 3 years of just pushing this business, BCDIP, which is a training company. And yeah, you guessed it right. One of the main products we offer to the market is skills development in project management. And we are now seeking accreditation by PMI to become ATP so that we can offer certification products into the market. Yeah, so I think having run out of money and out of energy, I said, let me go back into employment. But what was interesting, the job that called me, I applied to 3 jobs with the UNOPS, which is the UN arm that does massive projects for the UN around the world. The job that called me was engineering. I got hired by Unilever Tea Kenya, who are running a manufacturing plant in, actually we span four counties. We've got a plantation and a factory in Kisumu, in Limuru, and then we are here in Kericho, Bomet, and Nyamira County. They hired me as their head of engineering. I've got about 150 staff reporting into me, 8 are management level, the rest are blue collar workers. And part of my job in this role was to reorganize the whole department and, make it more efficient. And this time around, again, project management. I've been here for just over a year. I joined in March last year. I've restructured the business. I've introduced processes because I have a business architecture background, but it's been project management. I'm currently establishing a PMO. One of my managers is already on track to get a PMP. And the other 7 engineers are reporting to me. I'm encouraging them as well. So I hope by the time I think I leave this place, maybe I will leave a few PMPs behind as well. So I have been a full-time employee and I'm a part-time CEO. So we're still building our business. We pivoted it into a digital business last year in 2020, and I started the journey of learning Agile. So we've been fast tracking. So we pivoted from using a waterfall to Agile. So I hope you can hear how versatile project management is. And yes, indeed, I'm very passionate about it. Back to you, Susan.
That is absolutely amazing, Rose. And I was looking forward to hearing that story because I knew that there'd be a lot of learnings from it. And I think one of the key ones that I've picked out is Agile. And I think a few years ago, Agile was this big sounding random word that we all used to think, oh, wow, this is so amazing. But now it's become our reality. So still on you, Rose, for somebody who's here, who's thinking of making a move either way, from either business into employment or from employment into business within project management, what 2 pieces of advice would you give them based on your own learning?
I think one of them is look at what you have in your toolkit. You know, when we are growing our careers, we learn a lot of things. We pick up a lot of things along the journey. And in my 20 years, I've picked up business analysis. I'm certified in business analysis. I've got business architecture. I've studied entrepreneurship. I've got project management. I'm currently studying for my PMP, by the way, and then soon after to become a discipline Agile. Look at what do you have? You know, what's in your booty of skills and experience that you have picked up along the way, and who's in your network. And then with those, having looked at almost taking stock of what you have, then look at what's in your network, who's in your network. And you realize you can pivot anyway. So I'm the engineering manager for Unilever Tea Kenya and the CEO for BCDIP. I work for BCDIP at night and on weekends. And during the week, all day, I work for a full-time employment. So do not limit yourself. Do not pigeonhole yourself. We actually have more potential than we know. And I'm in the process of starting another business because I have figured out that if I can leverage other people, I can build as many businesses as I want. I can do many things. So don't limit yourself to a career has to follow a certain path. Open yourself, be willing to pivot, be willing to take risks and jump because you just never know. I never imagined I would be living in this beautiful plantation in Kericho, doing what I love with skills that I've picked up over the years.
Okay, that's amazing. And it's interesting how it ties in with what Jean had said earlier, because Jean talked about natural talent and you've talked about your toolkit. So bringing the two together, the combination between skills and experience and knowledge actually makes you a better project manager. And I know, Stephanie, you've dropped this hint in the chat, but people may not know that you are originally in the medical world, you were a nurse. And yet somehow you found your way into project management, and you have found a way to actually focus on the human factor within project management. So Stephanie, if you can just share your transition journey from medicine into project management and figuring out that you actually want to focus on the human factor of project management.
Yeah, it was a quite interesting journey.
I'm okay with this because I'm not okay.
It has been a very interesting journey because I was in the medical field and I had worked in Kenya in the medical field for, was it 15, 16 years? And I found myself not finding a job. And I had even done some degree in healthcare administration, healthcare management, but I still couldn't find a job. So I've ended up in an IT company. And that was actually at that time providing a link between the insurance companies and the healthcare providers, because those days the internet wasn't quite as far developed as it is these days in Kenya yet. And so it was still in the medical field. And I was looking forward to some exciting times because they were doing very interesting things. And then the company was kicked out of business and had to close down. One of the shareholders was the owner of one of the biggest IT companies in Kenya. And he had apparently seen something in me. So he asked me, why don't you join Computech? And I'm like, sure, but what would I do there? I'm a nurse. Because in my heart, I always see myself still as that nurse that I started out as. And then he said, don't worry, you know, your customer care will find something for you to do. Just join us. So I joined them. And first I became I always say the Antabi. Any client who had a problem ended up on my desk, and I tried to help them out. And very soon we realized we had a problem in project management. And I ended up sorting out all these problems one way or the other. And one day the MD called me to his office. And he said he would like me to take over project management. And that really took me off guard because I didn't even really know what project management is. And all I knew is that I don't really know anything about project management, in my opinion. So I told him that he'd be better off by employing somebody who has experience, because we really needed help in that side. And that time he agreed and let me go. And 6 months later, he sat me down again. This time he had another senior manager sitting next to him, and they were both looking very, very serious. And they told me, we want you to take up project management. We know you have refused, but now we need you to take it up. So I told him, but I had explained to you already that I don't know much about project management, and you better employ somebody who knows about it. I was told I have a choice. Either I do project management or I'll be asked to leave the company. And that's how I ended up in project management. Then, of course, I had to learn very quickly. On the internet, I got more confused than anything. And when I tried to reach out to the different organizations that at that time were offering project management training in one form or other, the only one that responded was actually the organization where I then did PMP training. And as I was sitting in the PMP training on the first day, and the person training us was now taking us through basics. He was just talking about what a project is, that you do project planning and what you do there and so on. And then I'm thinking, that sounds familiar. And that's when I realized project planning and nursing care planning is exactly the same. In nursing care planning, you have a patient. In project planning, you have a project. But you look at risks, you look at goals, you plan how you reach your goals, and you move from there. Of course, you also look at your stakeholders, you look at your budget, And that's when I realized I can actually do project management. So then I managed to embrace it. And coincidentally, at that time, the PMI Kenya chapter was just information. And I knew I needed mentors. I needed people who can give me the knowledge that I don't have. And so I decided to start attending chapter meetings, and very quickly had a whole host of mentors, people that could guide me through things, people who helped me understand the ins and outs. And at the same time, because I was now dealing with IT projects and mainly with the hardware side and the network infrastructure side of it, I also had to quickly learn and understand the basics of a data infrastructure. And from there, we moved on. And I've worked in many different positions. I've set up several PMOs, sorry. And in my current position, I work in the construction industry, but I work on strategy projects. So I don't go to the construction sites very often.
I love how you make that connection, Stephanie, because I know so many people feel like their current roles are so far removed from project management, or the most common thing, and I think someone has made that comment in the chat, that I've been given this project, but I'm not a project manager, I'm not certified. I mean, how do I even start? And you talking about the planning within nursing and being linked to project planning, I think somebody in the room is actually beginning to see that projects are not as mystical as they can often begin to sound or be made to sound, but there's actually a connection with something they may or already have done. And I want to take this moment to just jump over to the two people who are in the NGO world. Ron, I'll be asking you a question just now, but before I ask you this question, I actually want to ask Rupal a question. So Rupal, public policy and gender and education and healthcare and child protection, those are all the kinds of projects that you have worked in and that you have run. And for me, I'm just wondering, how do we then use project management to impact society? Because those are subjects that actually touch very closely on society. And how have you been able to do it?
Thanks, Susan. I'm actually going to end up saying very similar things to what we've heard so far. I, from a young age, have been very interested in wanting to do things that help people or help change circumstances so that people can just improve their lives. Sort of unblocking things that hold us back. My parents were active volunteers in different communities across Kenya, and so I, as a child, I spent a lot of time in medical camps, dental camps, helping out at children's homes, like all of those kinds of things. And so I never really thought about project management. I didn't even know what that was, but I thought about problems and I thought about what might those solutions be, even if I really didn't know, but just trying to sort of observe. And so I think the role of project management, as Rose put it so well, is to be that toolkit. And that's what I feel that it's been in my life. It took me a long time to arrive at the point of thinking of myself as a project management professional. I do have a PMP, but I've always thought of myself as a social justice type of person. And I've spent my career trying to help organizations solve those problems, either as a consultant, as an employee. Most of the organizations I've worked with are community-based. They've been in healthcare, they've been in construction, they've been in education, they've been in gender, all those things you named. But each and every one of them had a vision for what they thought society or an issue needed to look like, and had an understanding of where they were and needed to know, how do we get from here to there? And how do we measure whether we're making progress, and how do we unblock whatever obstacles we come across along the way? And I think that's entirely the role of project management, is to really take us from where we are to wherever we need to be, whether it's within your community, whether it's within your personal life, or whether it's building Kenya. It's really that toolkit and that framework, that others have also talked about where are you going, where are you now, and how do you get there? That's project management, and that framework, I think, really applies to everything. Even if you're not a project management manager, or even if you're not doing projects, if you're just doing operations, it's still a framework that we need to apply in just about everything we do. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I just want to ask you to talk a little bit about the work you've been doing more recently. And I know specifically around the COVID time, when COVID hit, your team was actually at the forefront of doing literally social justice, making sure that even in a pandemic, people were not missing out on needful education and information. And I just want you to talk a little bit about that, because for anyone in the room who's like you, in a seemingly completely different field, but very interested in causes, they might want to know what they could practically do on a day-to-day basis. And I think your work is a reflection of that. If you could just talk about that in like a minute.
Yeah, thank you. So I currently work at a Kenyan nonprofit that helps adolescents navigate through puberty safely and successfully in order to fulfill their life purpose. So in order to do that, we have to look at the problems and the solutions in an integrated way. We can't just focus on the COVID component or the education component or the health component. We're trying to really provide those integrated solutions. And so when COVID hit, there was a lot of material put out by the WHO and others speaking to adults and talking about all these, technical things and all these safety things, social distancing and washing hands, but nobody was really talking to adolescents. And the work that we do really looks at co-creating solutions with communities through storytelling and through their own experiences. So we have programs that have gone through extensive clinical trials and have proven to be successful because we created them with kids across Kenya. So we adapted that approach and we tried to start gathering the stories of what kids across Kenya were experiencing, looking at what they're seeing within their family context, within their school context. Schools are closing, within their communities, what's going on. And we tried to build those into materials that then, kind of transform into educational comics or tools or social media posts that can go out widely very easily across the country, but are extremely story-based. They're really based on the experiences of Kenyans. And so then you can always find yourself in those experiences. So in terms of, people who have passions around causes, I would say look at your cause as a whole. Think about the solution in an integrated way. Don't just focus on one component or feel limited to one sector, like, well, I only have to work in education because that's my field. You're not going to solve the problem. You just use that as your entry point, but think about the broader solution. And if fulfilling the broader solution is not within your own mandate, try and find the right networks or the right partners to help you get there, but always kind of keep that focus. And again, coming back to project management, you need that in order to get from where you are to achieving whatever you want to achieve in whatever that cause is, and figuring out the pathway to get there. So yeah, I would definitely just kind of maintain that overall holistic focus in order to achieve that impact.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's actually, I think it's powerful. It's powerful that we can actually change the world through project management. And Ron, I'm very curious to hear how biodiversity conservation, sustainability, and project management all came together and brought you to where you are today. Ron, you are in the hot seat.
Thank you, Susan. I hope you can all hear me. So very interesting how I got into project management. My journey is a little bit different. I did go straight to college after high school because of financial issues in the family. And so I did a bit of of work, legally, that is. Everything legal. I've worked in a carpentry workshop, I've been a waiter. And then I went into, I met someone who was working he was a development practitioner. And he took me in as basically an apprentice. And at that time, he was doing some projects in Aberdares, just around the time when the Aberdares fencing project started with the Kenya Wildlife Service, Kenya Forestry Reserve Institute. Sorry, it's what? Kenya Forest Research Institute, yes. And there was an organization called Rhino Arc, which was the main champion for the fencing project. And I found myself organizing meetings with the farmers groups in the Aberdares who get their water from the Aberdare ranges for their small small farms on which they grow horticultural crops. And these are important stakeholders in the conservation of the abadeas because, number one, they depend on the abadeas for their livelihood. And yet, they had been concerned for a long time that the riparian farmers, the big flower farm owners in Naivasha, are using the waters of Lake Naivasha in an unsustainable way. And they were afraid that their source of livelihood might be eroded. So I found myself in meetings. At that time, they were high-level meetings, but somehow I was in there. I was in there with them and organizing meetings with bringing the Kenya Wildlife Service and Kenya Forest Research Institute people to the ground to speak to these farmers, to allay their fears about the fencing of the Aberdare Reserve, and asking them to support the project, because ultimately, if the Aberdares is conserved, then their livelihoods would also be protected. And then subsequently from there, I got a scholarship to go and study. And naturally, I went to study development. And in the NGO sector, as Rupal has already said, we are in the project economy. The NGO, the nonprofit sector is mostly a project economy. So I did my bachelor's, and then I went into an organization called Child Fund International, where I worked with communities starting in South Nyanza, specifically in Rusinga Island, a very beautiful island. Projects we did there included early childhood education and development. Children need classrooms to learn. But they remember back then, the early childhood education and development was not part of the 844 system. So communities and parents had to put money together to hire a caregiver who would teach their children and nurture their skills when they were busy at work or on the farm. Unfortunately, again, in the Nyanza region and South Nyanza especially, the effects of HIV/AIDS were very, very severe. I think you all know that Homa Bay is one of the counties that is seriously affected by the HIV pandemic. And Bita or Rusinga Island, where I worked, is part of Homa Bay County. So you have many children who live with their grandmothers. Grandmothers are going out to look for a livelihood. These children need a place where they can play and eat, more importantly, have their growth monitored, get deworming tubs, all that. And government is not financing that. So organizations like the one I was working for were doing projects to construct ECD classrooms, buy materials, learning and playing materials for children, just to help nurture children between 5 years, let's say from 4 years and above. But then again, we had a problem with the water. The entire community depended on Lake Victoria, the raw water from the lake. Most of them don't treat it. And incidences of waterborne diseases were quite high. Borehole water was not feasible because of very high salinity. And I found myself managing a 7-kilometer pipeline construction project, which was my first major project and which was a nightmare for me. I just come fresh from college and I had not handled any water project previously. And here I was dealing with a lot. No one in my organization at that time in that region had experience with water projects. Suffice it to say, it was a nightmare, but I learned a lot from that project. We did not involve, I found the project already initiated, basically, and I was to pick it from where it was and run with it. But I found that they had not involved experts in water and water projects and all that engineering. We had to stop the project midway to get consultants to come on board to redesign the entire project and then now implement it properly. So when we talk about expert judgment in project management, I know what it means. Subsequently, I went to study MBA in social entrepreneurship, and I hit on this idea. It wasn't my own idea. It was an idea that has been implemented elsewhere, but sustainable construction, using sustainable building materials, which make construction cheaper and even environmentally friendly by producing interlocking building blocks on site. I was crazy about that idea and actually got featured in the Daily Nation. That's where that's my claim to fame. And I teamed up with a guy who is already in the construction business. Rather than start a new business, he persuaded me because I was very keen on starting my own business. He persuaded me, and we team up. He's an architect by training, and we did that for I think 2 years, and then we had to separate. And then I went back to the nonprofit sector. Now, one lesson I learned from the construction business is, and I think it's coming up, one of the questions that's coming up, switching industries. I found that you really want to be in an industry that you understand. So if you want to switch industries, either you already have the knowledge or you are going to get training and skills for that industry. Otherwise, you may become over-dependent on someone else, and that may not work out very well for you. So then I rejoined the nonprofit sector with an organization that I'm still working with now in the health sector, focusing on eye health. I like to tell people that when I say eye health, many people get confused because people are used to iPhone, iPads, and they wonder which one is this. So I say it has to do with eyes. And what we do now is to support counties. We work in 7 counties, or we partner with 7 counties to support them to provide quality eye care services. Because if you have been to your local county hospital, you will notice that the eye clinic is one of those dingy places, very tiny and ill-resourced and ill-equipped. So we do a lot of advocacy to try and promote that sector. We support training of eye care workers, the ratio of eye care workers, or let me say the ratio of ophthalmologists. With an ophthalmologist is the doctor who is specialized in eye care. In Kenya is, I think, 1 to something like 600,000 population. And most of these are concentrated in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu. So in most of the counties, people don't have access to an ophthalmologist. They don't have enough equipment, diagnostic and treatment equipment. So it's a dire situation which we are trying to play a role in alleviating. Also, working with the communities through people known as community health volunteers. Community health volunteers are basically community members who have volunteered their services to help their communities on health matters. So we train them on primary eye health, so that as they go around talking to people about malaria, HIV, water and sanitation, they also teach them about the common causes of blindness, how they can detect them and how to prevent them. And also they conduct screening. We teach them how to screen people to identify eye problems early so that these people can have their eyes or their sight protected, because 90% of vision loss in the world is preventable or treatable, 90%. And yet, if you go into these villages, you'll find many people living with avoidable blindness. So in a nutshell, that is it. But as Rupal said, actually Rupal just basically gave my own opening gambit, because my interest in this sector was triggered by the suffering that I saw around me when I was growing up. And I really cannot accept it. And I wish to do something that can help alleviate the situation and improve people's livelihoods. And I think we are late. So it's really urgent. Back to you.
I think, Ron, you had a very adventurous foray into project management. And I liked your story about how you found yourself in a water project and you had never done anything to do with water. And I'd just like to take a moment there and just ask, what advice would you give to anyone who's actually just starting out their career in project management? They may find themselves in a completely unknown industry or thrown in the deep end like you are. So what advice would you give them for someone who's just starting out?
For someone who's just starting out, I would say the most important thing is to learn, because we all started somewhere. We have changed industries or organizations, and the mission in different organizations will be different. So you have to be on your feet and be a willing learner. And if you are a quick learner and willing to learn, then you can always get around. But also, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learn from those mistakes, because the experience that you gain through learning and failing comes in handy in your future career. So learn from every success and every mistake that you encounter. I will also say that project management now has become, it permeates every sector. It permeates every sector of the economy. There are many people who are project managers without knowing it. They are called by a different title, but they are always managing projects. So they are project managers. And so you better get yourself a project management credential, because you will need the skills. Like Stephanie, and I think who else got thrown into the deep end of project management while kicking and screaming. So you might just be the next one, and you better get prepared. The credential, project management credential, whether it's the CAPM or the PMP, or the others that have come, will be handy as we go into the future. And it also prepares you to, to manage your projects more successfully. If I had a project management credential or more project management knowledge early on, that water project would have gone much better, maybe less stressful, and maybe even at less budget. But ultimately, also get into project management bodies, professional bodies like the Kenyan chapter. Here you get to interact with other project managers. You can get mentors who can help you along the journey. For those that are just starting, we have the kickoff, the new micro credential that PMI is giving for free, and you get a badge that you can display on your email or on your LinkedIn profile. So I think that's the advice I can give to someone who's just getting started.
Fantastic. And Jean, I know I mentioned this when we were starting out. I'll come back to you. So projects in government, influencing project management in the public sector. And I know there's a project you've been working on. How do you actually get heard?
Sorry, Susan, that last bit was what? How do you actually do what?
How do you get your voice heard? So one, you're a woman. Secondly, it's a public sector. Thirdly, there's this misconception about what project management is and isn't. So how do you actually get your voice heard and get the job done?
I think the skill to get your voice heard, that one I learned it when I got into project management. In fact, you probably don't know that I was also one of those people who got into project. I didn't know that the area that I liked was called project management, right? Because I liked to organize, I liked to coordinate, I liked creating solutions. I didn't realize that I was a problem solver and as a solution provider, So by the time I was doing, small initiatives here and there in my workplace, and my supervisor got to start seeing this, and we started having this interaction. And so she would give me more and more initiatives. And as a result, I started getting into this initiative mode without knowing that actually that is what it's called. It's project mode. And by the time I got into, I was headhunted into a position, into my first project, which was an SAP. That was where I started working in bigger teams, because the my first role was in a pretty small organization. And so for me, I was having a back and forth and having my voice heard with my supervisor, because we had a good relationship with her and the team and the people who worked around me. But this time I was in an SAP project, in a materials management project a long time ago. And I was now in a team. And I found, oh, there are other people who are smarter than me. And, there are people who have got a broader experience than me. And so, like Ron said, I just started learning. You sit there first, you listen. And there are some technical terms that you don't know. So you learn more of, you listen more, you understand those definitions, because project also has its own definitions. And then slowly by slowly, you start also responding to some of those, in that environment, because people will always ask you questions. So the best thing to do is, if you don't know, you say you don't know. But you must start learning, so that you don't always have that response that I'm not sure or I don't know. Because in project work, if you don't know, you'll slowly find your voice actually disappearing, because people will no longer come to you for opinions, because you never know. And so actually equipping yourself and trying to understand and trying to be knowledgeable about some of the environments that you're in is very important. So when I got my first project, or when I was assigned to my first project, which was in a very project-oriented environment, very fast-paced environment, I was in an even big, it was like I was a small fish in a big pond. And I didn't even know that there were people called planners. I didn't even know there were people called project managers. I found that, there were terms like EVM, or the end value management, and there was some software that were being used called MS Project and PeopleSoft, and a whole bunch of applications that were being used. And my voice became smaller, because I was in a place where there were very many a lot of new things that were happening, a lot of new experiences, and I was clueless. And we were in a very big environment where it was all systems oriented, but the only thing that I could bring to the table was my knowledge, and they could see my knowledge and my competence as a business systems analyst at the time. And so when I went in, they would look to me and ask me questions as a business systems analyst. And so I became an expert as a business systems analyst. And that is the best way that you can start to have your voice heard. And so even as I got into bigger projects, more complex projects, where now you're working with stakeholders who are from the regulator side, and now you're not working in the private sector. You're now working in public sector. You're working in industries that are new to you, because in the beginning I was in a big IT industry. And by the time I was coming out, I had done hospitality, I was in health, I was now doing logistics, we were doing warehousing and a whole bunch of stuff. And the more that I was working in my role, the more I became an expert, and the more my voice got more confident. Okay. Now moving into the public sector, because last year with the COVID coming up, we were involved in a big project, which was looking at the preparedness of the country, of a lot of the counties, of the 47 counties, in terms of COVID. And working in public sector is very different. And this is because you're not just working with, private entities, you're working with governments, and you're working with multiple governments. In this situation, we're working with county governments. And there's a very big hierarchy of people who you're working with. So actually identifying who the stakeholders are is very important, as well as you trying to make sure that what you're there for, your voice, and what you're there for, you're going to try and get the information that you're there, and you're trying to manage the project the way that it is supposed to. So actually the aspect of stakeholder management becomes huge. And for you, your voice is now as the project leader. And this is where your expertise, your technical expertise, your experience as a project manager, and your knowledge of the domain also becomes very key in your voice being heard, in other people kind of understanding that you know what you're talking about, and they can be able to give you, they can kind of look to you as a person who's, kind of has credibility in that particular area. And so going back to your question about, how do you get your voice heard? One of the most important thing, it's like I always I like to say, is that it begins with you. The kind of knowledge that you prepare yourself with, how you're equipped to get into that particular situation is important. If you don't know anything, then you'll not be able to have any value, any contribution. You will not have any opinion to give, and nobody is going to ask you for an opinion, and your voice will disappear. But if you're going to be in a situation where you're continuously growing yourself, where you've got continuous professional development, and you're continuing also to keep abreast of trends. Remember us when we started as project managers, when I started as a project manager in 2004, when I got my credential, we were only 100,000 people. And at that time, we were a few of us who were talking about project, probably not as many as there are now, 1 million people who are credentialed. And now the voice has become louder, and there are a lot more people who are talking about project management. But right now, what we are saying is that we need to start with ourselves. And we need to make sure that actually, even as we're working, we're gaining this experience so that we can become a voice, a voice of that can make a mark. And I think in our chapter in Kenya, actually, what we're looking at is to be that, to kind of create that momentum about project management, and you can do that as an individual. I hope I answered your question, Susan. There was quite a bit that was in there. And I think also just to speak to, it doesn't really matter even as running, whether you're running a project in the private or the private sector. The fundamentals of project management are basically the same. It is the kind of frameworks and maybe some of the structures that would affect you, but actually the knowledge that you come to the table with as a project manager are still very much valuable, and they would still be able to get you to help you to run that project to the end.
Absolutely. And there's a very nice comment here from Phyllis in the chat. She's actually saying that no experience goes into waste. So it really echoes what each and every one of you has said. And I realized that it was to summarize what the four of you have said in terms of getting your voice heard, in terms of how do you get started in the profession, how do you make the transition, how do you actually have an impact. I actually boiled it down to 4 L's: listen, learn, launch, and lead. So I think that's the 4 L's are something to actually take away from this session. Listen to the conversations that are going on around you, learn about the lingo, learn about the profession, learn about how to actually get stuff done, and then lead and launch, because having all the knowledge and keeping it to yourself and not actually doing anything with it doesn't help anyone. And before we go into the questions and the Q&A section, Irene, I don't know if there are still some questions we haven't answered as we have been going along. I know the panel has been responding as we've gone on. Just let me know if we still have some questions unanswered. This one goes to all of you, and it's a question of looking back. What would you do differently? Or in another way, what one piece of advice would you give to a project manager today that they can take away that you thought has really helped you grow and launch your career? And I think we can start with Stephanie.
I think the biggest thing is don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed too much. I know in our environment, we tend to say, oh, never say no to something, a challenge you're being given. But if I had to do it again, when I was thrown into project management, basically with my eyes covered and my hands tied behind my back, I was also given the little task of setting up in a PMO in a company that wasn't even sure what a PMO is. So here I am, I'm learning about project management, I'm learning about PMO, I'm learning everything at the same time. And that was definitely too much. And one of them will have to be left behind. And from there, one of the biggest lessons, I put it in the chat as well, that I learned in life is if you don't know something, speak up and ask for help. Don't start just doing things and think you can teach yourself along the way. If you ask for help, you will probably get a way, either you're being sent for some training or you find a mentor, or if you're involved in the PMI Kenya chapter, throw the question into the chats, and there'll be somebody who can help you along the way. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel and figure it out by yourself.
Awesome, fantastic. And Stephanie, if I was to pick something I've actually borrowed from you just by interacting with you, and your passion for project management, PMI, and being involved is actually that be involved. So not only ask for help, not only get a mentor, but be involved. So in case you've not had the pleasure of interacting with Stephanie, Stephanie lives, breathes PMI and project management and volunteering within project management. So if any of you would like to know more about PMI Kenya, how you can actually plug in, please do look for Stephanie. Please do connect with her. She's very passionate about volunteering and has seen immense growth in her career through volunteering. And Rose, to you, looking back, would you do anything differently? And if yes, what?
Wow. So I'll answer that question in two ways. Personally, I wouldn't do anything differently because my life and my career has surprised me. First, just getting thrown into the deep end and then going through the struggle, hating it, and then coming out of it triumphantly. Every time I come out of adversity, I come up with new skills, new perspectives, and almost learning new ways of doing life. So I'm so excited because I imagine, what if I live to be 80 or 90? I know I will still be working because I've discovered that every time we are expanding ourselves, there is no end. It only comes to an end when it is over, when we die. So I wouldn't change anything. However, from if I was to give advice to somebody who's getting into project management, I would say if you find yourself, like Ron said, his first project was a water project, I had no idea. My first 2 years were hell. I hated it. I got out of engineering school. There were no jobs. It was the time when the economy had shrunk significantly, and most of us who graduated in 2000, 50% of my class went out of the country. Some actually took road transport all the way to they ended up either in Zimbabwe, Botswana, or South Africa. They were looking for jobs. Can you just imagine? And I was thrown into a job in the oil, into a petroleum retailing company. And it had very little, just a touch of engineering and this other thing that I was doing, being asked to oversee projects, and I hated it. I struggled. Most of my early projects were always late, more than 50% over budget. They just were horrible. And I said, what is this thing? Why did I go to engineering school to come and do this work that is so undefined? What is this? But my first job after my MBA, I went for an MBA in the US, and then I got a job in South Africa. And I ended up in an oil and gas company, but a technology company. And the entire first year I was in training, fundamentals of project management, contract management, leadership. And then I started to love it. So I think for project management or any career, but when I listen to all the speakers today, is if you're thrown into something that is confusing, learn fast and then learn the correct way of doing that thing. You pick up the skill faster if you go through some kind of a structured, formalized training or join some organization like PMI where you can build the professionalism. It's so much more fun now. So for me, project management now is a symphony. Every time I go into something that is confusing, difficult, I say, how do I apply this thing? And it's because I've done it over and over. I have been trained in very many ways, both on the job and formally. And now, 20 years later, with my not very agile brain, like Michael, studying for CPM and passing in 8 weeks, I have been studying for my PMP. It's almost embarrassing. But since 2017, the first time I postponed it because I just started my company. And I looked and there was no time to study. And then I paid for it, and then I didn't do the exam. Then I tried to do it again last year, just before I pivoted my business, and then I was too burnt out. So this year, next month, I'm determined. I said, this enough is enough. Get it over and done with. Yeah. So I think for somebody who's looking to a career, anything you pivot into, learn the professional way to do it, and you're going to love it when you are professional, not just winging it. Yeah, that's my take.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rose. The thing that jumped out for me is new ways of doing life, that we are always discovering that. And isn't that what project management is? Because at every turn, you are learning a new way you could do something based on a new experience, based on an interaction with somebody who's had more experience than you, or just based on interacting with completely different people, as I imagine you are having when you're on the plant, all the way out there managing a very large team. So thank you so much for that, Rose. And Rupal, over to you. Would you change anything? If so, what would you change?
I, like Rose, when I look back, even though in certain situations I was frustrated and I wished that things were different, when I look back with a longer term view, they've all led to growth. However, I would say it's okay to have an exit strategy. It's okay. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean that you can't do anything or you can't succeed or you won't find the next job or the next role. Sometimes I've been in situations where, despite persevering, despite learning, despite trying to grow, I was really stagnant, and this was not a good situation for me. And I always found reasons, and very good reasons. I'm not saying there were excuses, but very good reasons to keep staying in those situations, because I needed the money. I didn't think there were other opportunities. You know, it was good for my family in some way or another. I think what I would change is the attitude of, that's okay, you know, you're in the situation, be okay with not wanting to be here forever, and start to look for small ways to unblock yourself and look for small ways to start moving in other directions that are sustainable, that are doable for you, and see how you can make that path open up again if you're feeling stuck. As I said, that doesn't mean you failed. It might actually be a gateway to something even bigger and a different variation of the path that takes you to a whole new destination. Project management is so versatile. It's so fluid. You can really apply it to anything. You can go to the moon and back. So have that faith that you know, something will open. When a door closes, a window will open. When a window closes, a door will open. That kind of thing. Talk to mentors. Talk to people within networks. Think about relationships. They will always pay back. When you're thinking about mentors, it's not. Don't think about them as a, you know, I had one conversation with someone and that was the end of the mentorship. Think about them as investing in your mentor. Your mentor will often learn just as much from you as you will from them. But yeah, so that would be the thing that I would change, is just being more positive and more optimistic about trying to find little ways to shift that path for myself. Thanks.
Thanks, Rupal. And I think I like what you've said, small things and small ways, because sometimes we feel like we must change everything, like it must be a 360-degree turn for it to actually make sense. But then a small change is better than no change as you wait for a bigger thing to actually happen. Thank you so much for that. That's actually very, very practical. Over to you, Ron. Would you do anything differently? Would you still be in water? Would you change the path, or how would it be for you looking back?
I take the path of Rupal and Rose. I tend to see the past as a stepping stone. My life has been, you know, a journey from when I spoke earlier. I've worked in very basic and very small jobs here and there, just to keep going from my youth. And so I see everything that I've done, even though it wasn't what I wanted at that time, as a stepping stone to something better in the future. The job that I did in the carpentry workshop helped me to pay for my fee balance in high school. I had a balance of around 3,000, and I paid it myself after doing some kazi ya mkono in a carpentry workshop, and that helped me to get a slightly better job, and it got, you know, going like that. So I don't like to look in the past and have regrets. They say sometimes we win, sometimes we learn. So that's how I like to see it. For someone that is starting, I would say probably, get to be comfortable with being vulnerable around people who know more. When you start a new job, for example, you want to prove that you really know the stuff. You forget that the people around you probably already know the stuff much more. They have many years of experience, and you close yourself in a corner and try to do everything yourself just to prove a point, when you could actually leverage all this knowledge around you, all this experience around you. So I would say be willing to be vulnerable and ask questions. Talk to other project managers or people in your position in other organizations, and just learn how they are getting along, and it will help you to settle in the job and be more comfortable in your position, and then you will grow. But for me, when I started with the PMI, it was around 2012 when I was doing my MBA. One of my lecturers who was actually taking the PMP class, not PMP, project management unit, encouraged the class to go for project management. He said, these people who do project management have a bright future. And he gave us a PIM book of, I think it was the 3rd edition. By then, of course, it was out of date, but he used it. And I went and perused the PIM book, and I said, if this is project management, then I've just been doing 1% of it. And from there, I really got interested in with the PMI, and started actively pursuing the PMP credential. So getting this experience, education, and credentials as early as you can will help you to grow faster. Some people are getting this credential much later. Of course, it doesn't take away the experience they have, the real life experience they have on projects. But once you get acquainted with PMI and the PMP, you realize that project management can be a whole lot different and much better and much more interesting than what you have done previously. So that's what I would do.
Thank you so much, Ron. And thank you especially for reminding us that no one succeeds alone, that success in our careers in project management is a collaborative effort, meaning you cannot shine alone as a project manager. You need a team around you. You need stakeholders. You need people to actually help you make sure things get done. Now, before I finish with you, Jean, you started us off. It is only fitting that you tie things off with a neat bow. Is there any question we still haven't answered? Irene, anything in the chat that would need to answer? Because I think our panelists were responding as we went along. Okay, there is a request for the panel's contacts. I think panelists, if you're able to drop your LinkedIn contact or LinkedIn address in the chat for anyone who'd like to connect with you beyond this session, that would be fantastic. So Jean, looking back, would you do anything differently?
Susan, my journey in project management,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, when I look back at my project management journey, I see that I've been there more than 20 years. And it's not, and sometimes you get to a point where like, I didn't even know that I have been that long in the career of project management in this profession. And my growth, my career journey has been not deliberate. Let me say it has not been deliberate. It has been more organic, because a lot of the times I was in a new situation that I didn't know. And so I was learning as I was going, and I was adapting as I was going. And your question takes me back to a saying by somebody called Nora Roberts. I don't really know who she is, but it's so kind of ideal. It says, if you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. And if you don't ask, the answer will always be no, right? And if you don't step forward, you'll always be and remain in the same place. Okay. And so when you're in your career in project management, you have to decide. In fact, they say that you have to decide, you cannot remain in the same place. You have to go forward, or you'd rather even go backwards, because if you're just in the same place, means that you're not making any kind of progress. And so for me, my message would be, and if I were to do things a little differently, much as my career has been very organic, I would encourage more risk. And when you say risk in your career, actually what you're saying, what I'm talking about is that if you're in the same place right now and you have been in the same position as a coordinator, maybe you're a coordinator, maybe
Yes.
you're a business analyst. We have an open mic.
Kupoa. Ofisi.
We have somebody having a conversation. Please mute your mic. Okay. I'm having a senior moment now, says Susan. What was I saying?
You were just about, yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, you have to make a decision. And if you're in a current position, for instance, you have been a business analyst, you've been called a project coordinator for the past 5 years. You're not moving. You're in the same place, and actually nobody seems to be recognizing what you're doing. You have to now take a step and decide where you're going. You have to have a North Star in your career and decide that actually this is not my script, and I'm not supposed to, and this is not where I had envisaged that I was going to be. Give time for your career. Say that you're going to be in a place for 2 years. There's a time when I left the US so that I can come back to Kenya, and I started practicing project management. And it was very new at the time. It was still kind of growing in 2010. And I was given a huge ERP project to implement. And it was in a big organization. And I said, I'm going to be here for 2 years so that I can demonstrate that project management works. And hopefully by that time, I will have found another opportunity. And that's exactly what I did. And by the time I came out of there, I started doing project management in real estate. And I went to a place called South Sudan where they were fighting, and I started doing real estate project management. And so that was the risk that I decided to take. But at the time before I did that, I was in an employed position, and I was content being in my employed position. I used to look at people quitting, and I would say those people are so courageous, they're so bold. I would never leave my seat because I wanted my paycheck. But let me just say to the people who are here is that when you're taking a risk in your career, and you decide that, and you're trying to make a decision as to whether you're going to be a consultant or whether you're going to stay forever in an employed position, you have to decide what season your career is in. What season are you in, so that you can be able to make that decision? And don't be comfortable to stay in the same place. When we are meeting a lot of people in my organization where we are placing resources, project management resources in jobs. And you can look at somebody's resume and see that they're budding in that particular role. And then you tell them, but what you don't have is a diversity in your portfolio. When you're in project management, they want, you're not just running one project continuously. You're running very many projects. You have to show diversity in your portfolio. And therefore, as a project manager, when you're a project resource, look to other type of projects. If you're in the NGO sector, then go to see whether maybe you've exhausted that particular area and come out and do a different sector. Okay, and then see whether actually at the end of the day, if you've got a very strong portfolio, are you ready now to go into consulting? That is the risk area. Are you ready now to start substituting your permanent employment and your permanent benefits with whether maybe a paycheck, maybe if you miss a paycheck this month, you'll be able to cope with it. And those are some of the brave decisions that you have to make as a project manager. And for me, when I left, by the time I left the US, where I had originally been trained as a project manager, and I was moving to Canada, it took me, by the time I went there, I realized I should have taken that risk earlier. Why? Because the portfolio that was in that new environment was broader, and it gave me, and I was able to do a lot more implementations in a different sector than what I did. And so by the time I was now building my portfolio. So I would just like to say that for all the people on this call, because everybody is looking to see how they can grow their project management portfolio, or how they can grow their career, go in with a decision or with a focus to take a measured risk in your career. If you decide, and actually we are doing that right now, we're offering that kind of a journey or hand holding in PMI Kenya, so that when you come in and we'll ask you, where do you want to go with your career? You have to have a kind of a view of where you're going, but do not remain in the same place because you'll always be in the same place. Okay, so that is my word for everybody, because there's a lot that is open out there. Project management rules are diverse, and allow yourself to travel, because that's another thing. That's another area of risk. And I remember the first time, even before I got into project management, I had a human resource lady who told me I was going to. They were relocating me from Nairobi to Nakuru. And I was like, why am I going to Nakuru? What am I going to do in Nakuru? I don't know anybody in Nakuru. How am I going to survive in that place? And she told me one thing that has resonated with me ever since. She said, when people look at you, your portfolio and your background, they see what kind of flexibility you have to go and be relocated to a different place. And that works very well for your career. So even as a project manager, allow yourself to move to different places. Don't be comfortable to stay in the same place. So with those many words, Susan, I hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Jean. And I think you have very nicely summarized what we've talked about this evening, that you can thrive. Whether you started as a generalist, whether you are an accident or project manager, because in many ways, each of you accidentally found yourself in projects, and you would never have imagined you'd be where you are today. You had to take a risk and say yes to an opportunity that was gray, that was scary, but then look at the doors that it opened for you. And I think that's a wonderful way to end this session this evening, just reminding people that there is no risk-free career, but it must be planned out. It must be intentional. You must ask for help. You can't do everything on your own. You must say yes when the opportunity is offered, and don't live in regret. And that it's okay to sometimes say that, you know what, it's not working out, that maybe I need to consider another avenue. And when you do consider that other avenue, learn from it, learn as fast as you can, and begin to shine and begin to thrive, because it is possible. And thank you all so much for your comments, for engaging in the chat, and for sharing from your wealth of experience. I know we are coming away from this session not only empowered, not only informed, but challenged to actually do things differently, to do things professionally, and to actually take advantage of the upcoming PMP drive. So I don't know if Elvira or Abdul, either one of you wants to talk about that before we end our evening.
Yes, I'll take it up from there.
Great.
There is an ongoing African chapter initiative for people to get PMP certification at a discounted rate. We will have a talk on Tuesday, which will be presented by Ephraim, and I welcome all of you who are in pursuit of the certification. You learn more on PMP and how you can take advantage of the ongoing promotion. I would like also to thank all the panelists for the good job they did tonight. We hope to have more of these sessions to encourage our young upcoming PMs. Thank you. And I don't know if Irene is here to close. If not, everybody have a good night.
Thank you, Abdul. I think we had an amazing evening, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. And we're looking forward to yet another career talk. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy your evening. Join us again. Thank you, the panelists. You've done an amazing job as usual, and we definitely wish you more growth in your careers. Enjoy.